right, I think we're just going to get started then. Let me just get over here. Okay. All right, so everyone, welcome to our November 22nd class of FDI. Audio is okay, looks okay, great. Again, double checking I'm not coming across as too quiet for anyone. Okay. All right, if I'm too quiet, let me know in the chat. All right, so jumping into our next class for November 22nd, we're going over design documents and customer engagement. So generally, writing of documents to help communicate your design, move that design through the production pipeline, and then also the overall question of customer engagement and how to get people really focused and excited and using your game. So this one goes into design documentation and what drives customer engagement. So, actually, let's flip around. It should be design documentation. But anyways, player engagement is keeping players' attention and interest. Design documentation is ideating, organizing, communicating the systems and content to facilitate that. But we're going to do these in reverse order, actually. Sorry, missed the revision on that slide. So, going into design documentation. So, jumping into what is design documentation. So, it allows designers to organize their creative thoughts. It's one thing to sit around and daydream about something, but actually one of the most powerful creative tools you can have is actually sitting down and writing it up on something and just going like, okay, what this mechanic, these kind of systems, this is the experience we're going for. The act of writing something down really helps you to think it through and process it. And you're going to find that's a far better design tool than just daydreaming about something than writing that down verbatim. It's a good chance for you just to kind of like kick the tires of how you want to be approaching these kinds of concepts. Another thing design documentation does is it provides a source of truth for other team members. If everyone has been talking about the design document independently and there's no central source of truth, everyone has a different idea of what the design document is and what the design for the project is. That can be hugely problematic. Also, if you got new team members coming on that perhaps you're not aware of as a designer, because we all largely work in distributed teams now, it's really handy for someone on their team to hand them your design document, say, okay, this is the design document, and if you got questions about that, this is the designer to talk to. So it's really useful in providing a source of truth for your other team members. Other thing it does that's really important, it facilitates effective communication. Never treat your design documentation as a one and done thing. Design documentation is to get alignment and then to facilitate conversation and communication. I want to give someone my design document and then I want them coming back to me with questions. That's fine. If they don't have questions about the design or at least some kind of comments, that's actually a concern for me because I'm thinking you may not have properly considered or be aware of what that design is actually trying to accomplish. So let's have a meeting and just go over that to make sure that you're actually aware of what we're trying to do here. So there's some really common design documentation issues I see with a lot of people as they're working on the design documents. It's extremely difficult to exhaustively predict what a game will be. Don't treat your design document as like a Bible. It's really just an initial guide and then an ongoing alignment. Your game will change as you're working on it. It's supposed to. That's a healthy part of the creative process. You want to be able to pivot and adjust based on market needs, better understanding the customer, better understanding of your own workflow, what's functioning in gameplay, what's not functioning in gameplay. There could be a whole entire melee combat system that your team's just having a hard time to figure out, and you're just like, look, we just got to cut that and just focus on ranged combat. It's fine. Don't treat it as being a Bible when you're writing your design document. Allow it to be flexible to adjust to the needs of your project. Another big issue is design documents rapidly become out of date. It's impossible to keep a design document accurate for the entire duration of a project. Generally, when I'm working on a design document, I like to have the design document very much focused on high-level project needs. And then anything that requires detailed information or information that is rapidly updated, that is stored elsewhere in the project of using what I generally refer to as just-in-time documentation. So just be aware there's a lot of information that the design document's just the wrong place to have it. Even a lot of design information, the design document's the wrong place to have it because design documents become out of date. So if you have a lot of information that's timely, so that's like specific tuning values or low-level system requirements, that document becomes out of date. Team members start to lose faith in that document. They will go to the documents less often. So it's really important to try to keep your design documents as high level as they can be, but low level enough that the rest of the team still has use for them. So I'm going to recommend what I'm referring to as a modern design doc approach. So there's 4 main design documents I recommend a project have. First is your ideation document. Second is presentation. Oh, wait, let me just go back there just a second here. Oh. There we go. Sorry, problem with the clicker there. Sorry, we've got a question here in chat. I'll get to that in just a second. So, 4 design document types. First is ideation. Second is presentation, collaboration, and just in time. So, coming up with ideas, presenting those ideas to other people, getting people to collaborate on said ideas, and then just in time documentation, which is generally comments about how this thing's actually supposed to function. So Nadine, question there. Is there usually also a design document for the game dev developing team as a whole, or is there usually a document for every department or team member? Oh, you're going to be making design documents that are as holistic as possible. So they should work for the team as a whole. I should be able to give the design document to just about anyone on the team, and they're going to get some kind of value out of it. Now, your design documents can have sections meant for specific team members, but as a whole, the document should be digestible for most different teams on the project. And there's a super secret 5th type of documentation, which we'll be getting to later. There's a bit of a teaser there. So, first version of design document is just the ideation document, so that's just about getting creativity flowing. So really, this is just you starting to write down ideas. So like there's a reason why I always have a whiteboard behind me and a whiteboard in my office. It is just for whenever I'm working with someone on design, we just start writing things out and drawing sketches and being like, well, what about this thing? Then that's going to go over there, then this. Well, no, that doesn't work. What if we did this approach over here? It's messy. I don't want anyone else looking at this thing. I certainly would not show that to anyone on the executive or C-suite team, but it is super useful for getting other people on the design team aligned and us working through what the design of this thing's actually going to be. And also just the process of writing down and socializing ideas, if it's a whiteboard or a sticky note or a cloud document or what have you, is really going to help you to properly vet and kind of work through what your design's supposed to be. Generally, as a designer, you're going to be given a problem for your design to solve, as in like, hey, we need 3 new multiplayer weapon types or something like that. And then you're going to sit down, either solo or with the design team, and just start working through what those things are going to be, what they have to be doing. It's really useful to be able to record what your thoughts are. It helps you to share them with the rest of the team. Everyone can look at the thoughts, as messy as they may be. Generally, after we've done a little whiteboard session or some kind of ideation session, we'll take a photo of it and just upload it to a shared cloud, just in case we're like, okay, wait a minute, what was that? We talked really briefly about an inventory management system. What did we talk about with that again? You can then look over your little picture of all your post-it notes or what have you and go, okay, so we have it there. Inventory management system like X or what have you. And then you can go, oh, okay, so that's what we were talking about. So as messy as ideation might be, it is very important to record it and make sure that everyone else has got some source of, okay, what was the conversation that was ongoing here? So again, as I said at the bottom here, there's no bad ideas when ideating. That's a really dangerous thing to have in an ideation session, is to be overly critical. I think it's important to have alignment, as in like, well, that's a great idea for possibly a different title, but I think that's getting us off of what we're actually trying to accomplish here. That new mechanic is leaning us too far away into action gameplay and too far away from puzzle gameplay. It doesn't feel like it's a fit. So, and also a lot of those things, even if it's an idea that doesn't fit, I'm still writing it down and say, okay, we're going to talk about that one later, or maybe we're going to come back to that one. Give the team time to think about it. Maybe while it does not fit on this project, it works on another project, or perhaps there's a little kernel of value within that little orphan concept. And as we start to think about it through the weeks, like, you know what, there was actually an interesting concept there. Perhaps not this exact version of that idea, but a variation of it. So at the end of your ideation session, you're going to have relatively a clear idea of how you want to approach the design. Not the exact design itself, but now we understand, for example, those 3 new multiplayer weapons. We want one that's about area control. We want one that's about crowd control, and we want one that's about, that's more of a defensive kind of weapon. So we have a general idea of how we're going to be approaching those 3 different weapon types. All right, so after you've done all your ideation, you're going to move on to presentation, which is another very important design document type. That's kind of what I'm doing here. It's generally a presentation. I will go to a member of the leadership team. After the ideation, I'm not showing them the ideation. I'm taking all those ideas and putting it into a nice, slick presentation where I can go to the leadership team and say, hey, for those 3 weapons you wanted, this is our design that we think is going to work out really well for those. So you're going to use your newly understood designs to make a presentation asking for resources. So you're asking for additional staff or just more hours, for you personally to be working on this, software licenses, all that kind of stuff. These are the things that we're going to need to actually get this design on screen, and this is why it's a good idea. You're going to clearly illuminate to the various stakeholders why this feature is important and what value it'll bring to the project overall. And another really important thing is, in all of this, provide fallback positions for in case you guys get behind schedule on something. Hey, this isn't coming together as we expected it to. So as a result, if it doesn't work, like those 3 weapons, if we have a problem, we can scale that down to these 2 weapons, but that's about as small as we can get this feature. I know a lot of people are worried that if you show people the cheaper version of something, that's what they'll automatically ask for. That hasn't been my experience. Usually there'll be some kind of negotiation, but it also really helps to give confidence from leadership in the design team, because they'll know, okay, the design team is aware of, you can't be endlessly asking for resources. If you start to run into scheduling problems, you've given yourselves a fallback position that'll still get the design done. And an important thing as well is give people a really clear idea of what you'll be delivering for them, so they know exactly what it is that these resources are going towards. You'll get specifically these 3 weapons. They're going to have these models, this number of animations. They'll be covering this kind of gameplay problem, willing these kinds of sound effects, all this kind of stuff. This is what you're going to be getting when you sign off and giving us the additional resources for these things. So then after all that, the output for that is going to be promised resources and support. So after all that, you've done your presentation. Ideally, you've gotten feedback from the executive team saying, okay, this sounds good. Here's what you wanted. Or you've had an ongoing dialogue and they're like, okay, we don't actually feel that this is right for the project, or this has been scoped too large, or perhaps it's been scoped too small and they want to have it be bigger. In which case you can iterate on the design, and then you can just kind of go back and forth with the executive team for a little bit until you finally get alignment, and then they write a check or send additional resources your way. Moving on. So after I've gotten my team together and softwares and utilities, all that kind of stuff, I think another important version of a design document is a collaboration document. So that would be indicating who's going to be working on what. So usually what I really like with the collaboration document is the document that most of the team works directly with. So effectively it's going to be, look at, this is our design for our feature, you know, our revised first-person shooter multiplayer weapons. And then this is who's going to be working on it. This is who's doing design. This is who's going to be programming. This is who's going to be doing the animation. This is who's going to be doing the audio. This is what we're trying to accomplish. You have a link probably to the presentation as well, because the presentation already includes a pretty clear example of what's going to be going on here and how this is going to work. And then you want to have, like, it's important for the collaboration document for a new team member to look at it, get an understanding of what you're going to be doing, who's working on what, and what prior discussions have happened before this, so they can kind of see what the overall life cycle of the feature has been so far. So going into my notes, I got a little ahead of myself there. So you're going to be writing up a document to align everyone on the design. Make it clear that design's going to need from the different departments. So, you know, we're going to need this from programming or tech. We're going to need these kind of assets from art, these elements from audio, these UX elements, this kind of stuff, just so all the different departments will understand what their overall collaboration on the design is going to be. You're going to be making it clear who's working on what, and who's working on what for the design in each department. So big point of the collaboration document is very much, it's about encouraging collaboration and communication regarding the overall design. So the output's going to be design overview document with technical requirements and ownership. Everyone with a clear idea. If I'm working as an artist, I can look at the collaboration document and I'll know, okay, you need this from me overall. And this is how it fits into the design. This is the problem that we're trying to solve with all this. So going on to the fourth type of design document is what's called just-in-time documentation, which is actually just as you're working on developing something, just putting in documentation about how something works. So if you're programming or you're making a level or you're tuning a value, just wherever you can within that program, if it's an Excel spreadsheet or if it's source code or a level editor, just making it clear why you're making certain decisions. This is an element of design I know a lot of designers will overlook or will do this really poorly. And as a result, 2 weeks later, you're trying to fix a bug in their systems. You're like, I have no idea how any of this stuff's even supposed to work. So pretty much as you're implementing things, write down your thought process on why you're making certain decisions. The other thing is, as you're making assets, make the naming clear and unambiguous. And finding important information should be clear and its function should be self-evident. So there was one project, just trying to think, a couple projects I've worked on, and this was even within like some pretty large companies where like there was data variable names that were completely arbitrary. Like one guy just kept referring to Queequeg in all of his programming, and I had to pull him aside and say, you have to tell me what the heck Queequeg is, because you keep referencing it and I have no idea what Queequeg is. So I have no idea if it's working as it's supposed to. He's like, oh, it's a count of the number of living enemies. I'm like, well, call it num living enemies then, because calling it Queequeg is just confusing, and this thing's now going to be full of bugs we cannot fix, because I don't know what Queequeg's supposed to be doing, unless I sit there all day, you know, going through your source code and trying to figure this out. You know, as a level designer, if I've got a piece of cover or a doorway, making sure it's clearly labeled. This is a door. This is a piece of cover. This is the boss spawn point. Don't just call it spawn point 325 or spawn point south. What exactly is this thing doing? That's an important role, because an important responsibility, because otherwise, as other people have to work with the assets that you've been working on, they'll have to spend so much time trying to reverse engineer or figure out what you're doing. Imagine there's a deadline, you're sick, or you've been hit by a bus or something like that. Someone who has no familiarity of your source code, your project, has to come in and work on this now. They're just going to be confused, and it's just going to be, it'll be slower, more likely to have bugs in it, and it's just going to cost you a lot of time in the long run. And really, it takes seconds to name something properly. Doesn't have to be 100% perfect. It just has to be, give them a hint about what this thing actually does. As clear a hint as you can. So general output of this is just lots of comments, file names that are clear and easy to understand. It sounds like a small thing, but just-in-time documentation is so important in your job as a designer. All right, moving on. So for a modern design document approach, you want to have 4 design document types. Those are your ideation, presentation, collaboration, and just-in-time. Ideation is generating your ideas, getting an understanding of what that design is. Presentation is going to be a presentation you make to senior or executive level management, requesting resources. I need artists and programmers and software libraries and all this kind of stuff. I need you guys to be spending money so I can get this thing done. After you've got all your resources, you want to write another design document that collaborates everyone, gets everyone knowing what they're working on, what we're overall trying to accomplish here, what the responsibilities are. And then as you're actually developing this, you want to be doing your just-in-time documentation, making sure you've got your comments, clear file names, all that kind of stuff. But finally, the most important design document, that super secret 5th design document, is really just good old-fashioned person-to-person communication. Really, like, the most valuable thing you can do on a design team. If you miss everything else, still be communicating with each other. If you're doing everything, but you're not having regular person-to-person communication, your design will go off the rails, because it is impossible to exhaustively document something. And also, designs are constantly changing and modifying as you're understanding more and more of the project. So really important part of the process is just do regular check-ins with people. Hey, how's it going? Do you have any questions about what's going on? Or letting people know, oh, by the way, we've modified this now. Now when the boss spawns, it always has to spawn facing south due to design and technical requirements or something like that. And just making sure that you're having regular communication with how people are approaching things. Do they have any questions? Are they running into any overall friction points? This is going to be so important. I know some teams that are very functional that actually do not have a formal design documentation process. They've replaced it with just a really thorough person-to-person communication process. Where I still recommend using design documents, though, is that in kind of the modern remote workplace, person-to-person communication is a lot more challenging. As a result, it's really important to have that fallback of actual design documentation. And I think the process of writing out your ideas and having to look at them on paper is actually a really important creative tool. All right. Moving on. Actually, before I do that, does anyone have any questions regarding design documentation?
I was thinking, I was thinking when a member of the team has a clear idea of the game, but he has problems to put it in the design. So how we as a team can help him, or maybe in which part of the documentation we can suggest him to write his ideas to comment to everyone, so and keep the idea not much having no more changes.
That's actually a really good question. So let me think. First off, I'd say, like, if you're right at ideation and you've got designers that are having a hard time communicating their ideas, that is that's a pretty big skill issue, I'd say, overall. As in, like, as a designer, a big part of the job is me being able to communicate how the design works and how the design should function to the rest of the team. If I'm a solo developer, then it's much less of a concern, of course. But generally, like how we're kind of focusing this class is based on you becoming like a design professional, and that means you're working for a company, working for a team. You have to communicate with that team. So I'd say right off the bat, as a designer, you got to be able to figure out effective communication. Doesn't have to be spotless, but you have to at least be able to somehow communicate, write documentation, and let people know what the design is, problems you're trying to solve, resources that are required. Now, to kind of go back to your question there, so actually, sorry, I got to ask, is it Alex?
Just call me Anxious because it's the name of I have in YouTube.
Okay, Anxious. Okay, sure thing, Anxious. All right, Anxious. So if you do have someone that is a poor communicator on the design team, and you got to roll with that anyways, I would try to get them to write down the design regarding specific problems it's solving and the overall feel or emotional engagement they're trying to get within their design. Try to get that stuff aligned and on screen. Within that, especially that kind of experiential communication will help to align the rest of the team in a really effective manner. Now, if we're in the middle of development and an artist has had a fantastic design idea and you're trying to get that properly documented, I would generally partner them with a designer to sit down and write down what their idea is supposed to be. I would not have the artist or the dev or the audio guy writing a design document. It's not their job. It's not their profession. It's not necessarily the skill set. Perhaps they're really great at it, in which case, sure thing. Most often, I would want to have that artist focusing on art, design team focusing on design. So I would partner them with the designer, have the designer write the document, make sure it matches with the design that they had in mind, and then start rolling that out to the rest of the team. Perhaps taking it through this entire process, or perhaps, like if it's just a small adjustment, usually you don't need to do an additional presentation about, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. If it is for an entirely new feature, then yeah, you go back to square one, you ideate on it, you present it to ask for resources, because one thing executive really doesn't like is when you use resources that they said to use for something else and use them to fund your own pet concepts. That is never a happy meeting to be in. I know entire projects that have been shit-canned over that. What was it? One team, large team, well-established. They were certain that they were working on a big contract, major game developer. They were certain that the coolest thing for them to do would be to make a hand-drawn opening cinematic for the game. They pitched it. They were told no. They went ahead and did it anyways. They showed it to the producer and they're like, or the publisher, and they're like, so you just spent 3 months doing the thing we told you not to do. No, we're just going to cancel this because we can't trust you guys anymore. So that's the thing. If you're putting in a new feature, for God's sakes, present it, pitch it, get sign off that yes, I get to spend the publisher the publisher's money on this feature, and they understand specifically what they're going to be getting from that feature. All right. Any other questions? Cool. Awesome. All right. Moving on. So looking at customer engagement. So how do we get people to get into games and enjoy playing games? This is interesting. It is if I could speak candidly, this is one of those holy grails that a lot of people are pursuing. But man, a lot of people just go about this entirely the wrong way and they end up self-sabotaging. And it's really frustrating as a developer just being like, man, you're making this so much harder than it needs to be. And of course, there is no absolute science on this, but there's certainly some best practices and just things to be aware of. So for customer engagement, keeping players engaged. So, important thing, a good game is more not bad than it is good. This is one of the primary mistakes so many people make, as they said, if I make the best version of something, that'll be the version that everyone likes. The problem with that, everyone's got a different definition of best. The thing that everyone can agree on is generally when something's terrible. If I'm having, like the example I always like to go with this is like McDonald's sells the most hamburgers in the world. They don't sell the best hamburgers in the world. But they sell a version of a hamburger that's enjoyable enough. They get that kind of like that threshold of like, this is an experience enough people approve of that they're not taking a bite and saying, fuck this, I'm done, I'm never coming back. They're like, yeah, that was pretty good, Certainly I've had better, but this is good enough. If you can get to that good enough threshold, you've gotten generally customer buy-in on a lot of things. So, but an important thing is, what a lot of people also overlook is that me trying to make something the best it ever was, that's an exponential amount of effort. So let's say terrible is this line here. Good enough is this line here. And actually, let's see if I can think of the, and best ever is like this line here. To get to best ever, it's like an exponential amount of effort. Like it just kind of hockey sticks at a certain point for me to get it to the best thing ever. If I get it to good enough or slightly better above good enough, this is all effort I can now put to other things. I can go through the rest of the experience and say, where else are people having problems here that I can solve that my competitor has not solved? Remember, like I got a really in-depth discussion about this with someone yesterday I'm working with. But largely it's like, look at, like if, and the discussion was entirely, how can we bring down the good enough line? Because if I can bring that down, that saves me so much effort in other things that we can do, and then we can solve problems no one else has solved. Like it's just, we're looking at like, what's the overall color space that we want to use for rendering? What's the lowest resolution that we can target? What's the simplest version of a CPU? What's the fewest number of button presses we can have for this sequence? What's the lowest complexity? What's like, in a certain way, it's like, what's the lowest quality product we can have that will still get customers engaged? Because then we can take all those savings of man hours and effort and put that into artistry and fun and innovation and all this other stuff. It's like, you see this in so many different industries that are really successful. The video game industry keeps looking at the movie industry. Movies are at 24 frames per second because that was the absolute lowest frame rate you can have film be at before it starts looking choppy. It was just cost saving. They're not like, that's the perfect value for film. They're like, nope, that's the cheapest we can get it. Set. Now find your innovation within that. Those limitations are one of the things that helped it to really rise to an overall kind of like such a dominant art style. Another example I'd give is like Van Gogh does not paint better when you give him a larger canvas. It's that limitation that's useful. Actually, another example I love for modern media is how dominant manga is. Like, I think manga is like 30% of the US comics market. And there's so much stuff that manga does that US comics don't do. It's black and white. It's made on cheap paper. It reads in the opposite direction to what Western books do. It goes right to left as opposed to left to right. Hope we can get that right. But all that stuff is the thing that helped it to proliferate so quickly. As you lower down the good enough bar, you're able to execute far faster and get into far more markets. Okay, but then how do you know what'll be a bit too terrible? Thank you very much, Nadine. We're gonna get into that in just a second. Actually, sorry, going into manga, because this is something I learned recently, which I thought was fascinating, was there are all these super valuable IPs that Western publishers want to have access to in manga. That was, they want to be able to publish Dragon Ball and Naruto and Sailor Moon. And they tried doing exhaustive colorization and westernization efforts, and they couldn't. They're throwing money at the problem, and all the publishers are like, no, we're just not interested. And then one publisher in the US just went over to Japan and said, okay, what if we published it exactly the same way you do? We will only translate dialogue. Everything else is exactly the same. And he got all the friggin' super valuable IPs. And these were billion-dollar IPs. His pitch was literally, we're lowering this down as far as possible. We won't colorize it. We won't westernize it. We will do the minimum translation we can. Is that acceptable? And they're like, yes. They liked this solution better rather than this solution. So this was also something that kept people engaged. Getting it down to here is what made it take over 30% of the comic market in the US. And for comparison, Marvel and DC combined have about 7% of comic revenue, of US comic revenue. So low quality, black and white, Japanese comics are outselling high grade, glossy, westernized, high budget productions like 5 to 1 because they understand this stuff. So how do you make sure it's not a terrible experience though? Oh, actually, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Going into this, why this is important. Evolutionarily, we are more sensitive to negative experience than positive experience. For example, it takes 6 positive interactions to cancel 1 negative interaction. So if I've got all this amazing stuff, but I've got a frustrating character navigation system, it doesn't matter all the amazing things I've done. Players are just frustrated that the character is so difficult to move. So the negative elements of the game will dominate the experience. And actually, Nadine, I'm going to get to your question in just a little bit. I want to go into just a bit more examples about why it's so important to focus on eliminating the negative rather than to focus exclusively on the positive. So, quick example here. Imagine a meal. It's the best meal ever. This is a fantastic steak dinner. It is Wagyu beef and artisanal PEI potatoes. A French chef who has spent 30 years mastering this meal. It's phenomenal. And then we're just gonna add one additional thing to the meal. An artisanal import that's a little abstract. Onto the plate, we are going to add in a single human tooth. It's very clean. It has been sanitized. But someone in the kitchen found a human tooth and said, you know what? We're going to make this our artistic and expressive. We're adding an element of body horror to your meal. Isn't that exciting? Now, the question is, now that you see a human tooth on the plate, will you touch anything else on that plate? Most people will not. The presence of a human tooth, even if it's sanitized and all that other stuff, it's such a negative, visceral reaction. It has tainted the rest of the experience. This is the kind of thing, this is how sensitive we are to negative experience. Even if I could rationally and scientifically argue to you that there is no chance of cross-contamination or pollution or anything, if it's on the plate, that's a huge negative experience. If it's touching the food, that's an even bigger negative experience. It's a human tooth. It's kind of a shitty thing to see on your meal. And that completely undoes all the work that's been done making this the best thing ever. You add one human tooth, it derails the entire thing. And I can't explain that away to people. And this is the thing. This is how sensitive we are to any kind of negative experience. If I, again, if I'm doing the best first-person shooter ever, but you know, it's hard for me to tell if my attacks are impacting enemies. That's a problem. What was it? Alone having to eat it gives me shivers. Yeah. So from Nadine saying the idea just gives her shivers. Yeah, yeah. Like it's not a pleasant idea, which is why it's the example I give here. So you know, there's I think the this is me speaking personal opinion here. The original Yooka-Laylee is a very good third-person platformer that will not tell you where the next objective is, and that is so frustrating for me. I had to put it down because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna jump in and play it. Fuck, what am I doing? Okay, was I going over? No, okay, no, am I going over here? Or like, okay, just tell me where you want me to go on the map. Like, I know you want me to explore all this and have like this childlike wonder as I frolic from platform to platform, but this is just getting tedious now because I'm growing up with professional responsibilities and I can't just obsess on the level layouts of this one game constantly. You already have a map, just mark on the map where you want me to go. Just mark on the map where you want me to go, and I want to like this experience. Please work with me on this. And it's great. Great animation, great art. I really like the gameplay, but like the fact that, you know, I haven't played it for a week. I pick it up, look at it, and I got to figure out where this next objective is in a way that isn't interesting or intuitive. It was just too much friction, and I just noped out of the experience. Oh, I'm trying to think. There's another game I was playing. Oh my god, yeah. There was. Man, again, this is me. I hate to be critical of games. I know people work really hard on them, but at the same time, like, man, these are games I really want to like, and I was really excited to play them. But I was playing. It was a game I was really excited to try out. Venba. It's about Indian cooking, a really neat narrative Indian cooking game. And I'm like, this sounds great. And I love the art style and I love the approach. And I get to the very first puzzle of the game. And it tells me it's something like, put water into the cooker. It does not explain to me exactly what a cooker is. There's a pot on a stove. And then there's about 3 other elements. And I keep trying to put water into the pot because I'm like, yeah, that's where I'm cooking. Clearly that's the cooker. The cooker is something else. And I solve that, and then it gives me another instruction that is also unintuitive and isn't explained to me. And eventually I realize all I'm doing is just grabbing every single element of the game and just going, okay, does that work with that? No. Does that work with that? No. Does that work with that? No. Does that work with that? Yes. Okay, does that work with that? No. 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 Does that work with that? Yes. And then I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm just dragging stuff across the screen randomly now. I'm no longer enjoying what I'm doing here because it's so unclear what exactly it is that that I'm doing wrong. Like, it would give me little messages like, oh, that doesn't seem right. I'm like, okay, that doesn't help me at all. You know, or like, there's a better way of doing that. I'm like, clearly, because it's not working, give me a hint. Give me a hint of what you want me to do and I will be there. But asking me to try everything against everything else was just not a positive experience. And I'm perhaps there was something I overlooked, but again, as a customer who was excited about the experience and wanted to get into it and was on board with it, they lost me very quickly by just assuming I had knowledge, which I just didn't. And as a result, I'm just kind of noped out of it. But, you know, love what they were trying to do. Really hope that team the best success going forwards. But that's just the example of this thing. Like, look at just that friction of me just trying to figure out what they wanted me to do with these puzzles. That undermined how much I was actually enjoying the puzzles. All right, moving on. So, how do you tell what players don't like about your game? Because this is clearly very important, but it's actually pretty straightforward. It's just a playtesting. With your games, just constantly be playtesting. This is, you know, we've got the different projects that we have the students here doing in Discord. And big part of that is trying to get you to every week deliver something, have someone look over it, provide feedback on what they like, what don't they like, just getting used to that idea. I always like to think of playtesting as being like hitting the compile button on your designs. I actually have no idea if any of this will work. No idea whatsoever until I put it in front of someone and just watch them do it. So playtesting allows you to determine where friction is occurring, and also allows you to see what patterns emerge. There's a really interesting concept in design. What was a phrase? I believe it was the phrase. It was called footpathing, and that is if you put people into a space, they will socially start to identify ideal navigation paths through that space, and they will let you know what those ideal navigation paths are. As an architect or as a designer, it's almost impossible for me to tell them what those ideal paths are. I can suggest, I can make an educated guess, but at the end of the day, I'll just start to realize, oh shit, we have heavy traffic. Like, I'm designing a city. We got heavy traffic here. No one's crossing at the crosswalk. The solution to that isn't I force everyone to cross the crosswalk. I move the crosswalk to where people are crossing. Unless there's a very specific reason I can't be doing that. And this is the thing. In playtesting, what's great is you'll start to see what's everyone trying to do. Where are they naturally gravitating towards? Like there's one game we're playtesting right now. There's one scene we notice where everyone keeps clicking on background elements that are non-interactive, and it only happens in this one scene. And we're like, okay, players are telling us they want to learn more about the world. Here, we got to start putting a lot of stuff for them to interact with and figure out a way of just putting story in there and additional things for them to dig into because they're telling us this is what they want. As opposed to us putting in a big error message saying, nope, don't do that. Just, see what the footpathing is, see what play patterns emerge. And the big thing with playtesting, again, is just see where friction is occurring. Are they getting confused? Are they getting lost? Are they disengaged? Are they indifferent? That's the thing, actually. Like, what kills a project is not people hating it. It's people being indifferent to it. If someone's angry or hating your project, it means that you were able to disappoint them, and that means that they were engaged, which is really important. You can get those people back. If people are trying something and they just aren't interested in it, or they're bored or indifferent, it's very hard to get them re-engaged. And the thing as well is they're also, what makes indifference really challenging and really dangerous is that will, if you were to ask them, rate the experience on a scale of 1 to 10, they'll give it a 7. But that 7 doesn't mean that it's better than a 2. Well, it is in certain ways. That 7's kind of like, it's almost like a valley of disengagement. If your game's got 7s, you'll actually find that's a game that no one really objects to, no one's really interested. If you've got, there's an element with playtesting that I really like. It's called 2s and 10s. This is from the guy who designed Magic the Gathering, the card game. He says when they playtest, they look for 2s and 10s. They want to have experiences that people either love or they hate, but they have to be engaged. What he doesn't want is people giving them 5 to 7s. He's like, with that, what we've made is something that everyone's fine with. No one's excited. No one's going to show up. No one's going to recommend it. No one's going to talk about it. Even if it's terrible, you do get a highlight of people will then talk about the terrible experience they've had to their friends and say, oh my God, have you seen that film, The Room? It is dreadful. You have to see how bad this thing is. It's getting that evocative reaction. It's getting that engagement that's really important. So this is the thing with playtesting. It will let you know where that friction's occurring. It'll let you also know if players are just getting bored with the experience overall. Okay, moving on. So, playtesting process. Let's see. Oh, we're getting a little close on time here, so I may have to speed run this a little bit. So, if I'm playtesting, what I want to do is get someone playing your game who's viewing it with fresh eyes. Ideally, a playtester is someone who's entirely new. They haven't played the game before. My ideal for a playtester is someone who doesn't actually game, because I want to understand the friction with this, where this bar actually is on the broadest definition of a customer as possible. I can then specify that in. I would rather bring in a player who is not perhaps my target customer, and I can see them play, and then determine that perhaps that was an invalid playtester, rather than assume that they're an invalid playtester. Because I've had this happen so many times. We'll bring in people that are hardcore first-person shooter players to play a card game, and they end up loving it. And they're like, this was so much fun. I really liked this, but man, there's so much text on these cards, and I was having a hard time just reading all that stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. A lot of card players, they are going to, they're fine with text, but there's a subset of people who want to play the game and really like it. That's too much text for them. Let's pull that text in. You know, we'll find what that right balance is. But now we know there's an entire group of players we're assuming that if we assumed did not like this game, we would have overlooked important information about how we can potentially expand our audience and reach new players. And, you know, it just came down to like, yeah, they're just a little bit too much text on the cards. And we can fix that. That's an easy fix. And it lowers your translation costs, which is fantastic. So getting someone playing the game who's viewing it with fresh eyes, the fresher the better. If you can't get someone with fresh eyes, I still recommend doing a play test just to see, like, get the freshest eyes you can. On some of my teams, we refer to this as internal versus external play tests. So we just kind of like alternate them now, just because it can be really hard to be constantly finding new people. Because we're like, okay, every second week it's someone new. Every even weeks, someone new. Odd weeks, we'll just find someone in the company who just hasn't seen the game in a long time, get them to look over the most recent changes. So, get your fresh eyes. Then you ask them to play the game. We've heard this out loud, and that is as they're playing, as they're thinking about it, just have them talk you through their decision process. Oh, cool, I didn't know I could go there. Or why is this not reacting when I click on it? Or man, how come I can't jump over this gap? Those kinds of things. Just get them talking and talking about their thoughts while that's going on. As the person running the playtest, you do not interrupt. You do not... I try to avoid asking questions, because the problem we're getting into is you would ask leading questions, which would then prevent the playtester from giving honest and open feedback. So generally I have a rule on playtest. Once the playtest starts, unless the playtest is entirely halted due to a serious technical flaw that we have to give instructions for the playtester to get past, okay. For example, the game will hard crash if you go into the room facing to the left. So when you go into that room, just make sure you're facing to the right. That kind of stuff. But we don't say, oh, you've got to shoot the boss here. Or, oh, you actually can exit the room in that direction. If they're stuck, we just have to sit there and be like, well, that sucks. The reason why I say you don't allow the players to get through that, because then the entire team will habituate to that, and then during the playtest, you'll constantly be coaching the player, and you will start ignoring really critical things. Remember, new players don't have you there to coach them. So if I'm coaching someone on a playtest, I'm completely invalidating why we're even doing the playtest. I might as well just be playing it myself then, because I'm just telling them, play it like I do. Not like what you do, which is why we're playtesting. We want how they're playing it. I already know how I play it. I don't care how I play it. How many copies of the game do I buy? One, if that. Hell, I even know like senior developers who won't even purchase games they've worked on, because they're like, yeah, I worked on that thing for 4 years. I just don't need to own a copy of it. It's fine. It's fine. I have my name in the credit. It's okay. So that's the thing. If it's you, it's 1, possibly even less than that. So focus on what they're doing. Don't correct them. So carefully watch the player's face and what's on screen. So generally when trying to play test, I'm looking for like moments of like, intense concentration. That kind of stuff. What I'm also worried about is like indifference. There's like, that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, they're clearly not engaged in this. They're not interested. In which case we then, I'll rally the team afterwards and say, okay, we've got a big problem. That was a very bored player. At the end, they may have said it was fine, but throughout the playtest, they were clearly thinking about lunch and not the game. So we've got to figure out what's going on there, and we got to fix it. And last thing is afterwards, ask for their feedback. Generally, I always like asking 3 questions of 3. What did you like? What didn't you like? And what would you change? That covers most of the feedback. I never ask them, how would you improve this? Because it's like a chef asking the person, well, I don't know, what do you want to eat? It's like, well, that's not really the customer's job to tell you what you're supposed to be making. You have to figure out what it is that they want without them specifically telling you. The problem with having someone specifically telling you something, they will tell you the most recent experience they have that they can remember. So if I ask them, what should I do here? They're not telling me what works for my design or the design of the project. They're telling me a design they interacted with recently that they found good enough. They're like, yeah, you should make it more like Animal Crossing or more like Minecraft. Man, I sure wish this card game had crafting in it, because I just played a crafting game. So this is the thing. Avoid asking them what they would do, because then they, like I said, they just tell you what they played recently and not how you should actually improve your design. Okay. Moving on. Oh. Boom. So playtesting is critical. All these companies that are very successful, they playtest the fuck out of all their shit. They really playtest quite intensely. That was actually one of the things I really liked at Rockstar, is the executive team is constantly playing the game. They're constantly playing the game. They're constantly providing feedback. They're constantly looking at it from the customer's perspective. That was one of my favorite performance reviews when I started at Rockstar. Was I'd come from EA, where things were very much, you work towards a metric and they give you specific tangible deliverables. This many levels, this enemy encounter, this boss fight, etc., etc. At Rockstar, it was entirely about if your work's not done until it's fun, which I really liked. Like, I would do something and then I would set up a copy to the executives. I'd go home and then I'd get in and there'd be angry emails saying, "Why did you send this to us if it wasn't fun?" I'm like, "Because it's what you asked for." And they're like, "Yeah, but like, as a designer, you should be aware of if something you've made is not enjoyable. If you can't tell that, then why do we have you here?" And I'm like, "Oh shit, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't like it either. I just thought this is what you guys wanted. Like, make it something fun." So I'm like, "Okay, switch, shit." There we go, which is one of the reasons they're generally pretty enjoyable games. Valve does this obsessively. They playtest every week. PlayStation, a lot of the reasons that games like God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn, a lot of their titles have worked out so well, is that they so aggressively playtest. A lot of, like, the God of War remake was unplayable for quite a while, as in, like, it was so bad they're like, we should probably just can this. And then they started playtesting it and realized, oh, okay, so like players don't like this and they don't like that, so we will fix specifically this, specifically that. And then the entire experience started to come together. Interestingly enough, as far as I know, this is not something Microsoft does a very good job of. On the rumor mill, apparently Microsoft, they don't play test, they focus test. And what they'll do is they'll sit there and tell the play tester what to focus on and the feedback they're looking for. We want you to only look at the dialogue system. And they won't realize that every single player hated character movement. And they never ask about character movement, so they never hear about the fact that character movement's bad. And they don't think to ask about character movement because everyone's familiar with how the character moves. So they're like, well, clearly that's fine. We just want to know about dialogue. And yeah, so then the dialogue system's fine, but the character movement still sucks. You know, that's the thing is like playtesting is high level and is looking at the entire player experience. Focus testing is about one specific feature or one specific audience. Different tools, different applications. Focus testing can be very useful for solving a very specific problem, but it is not a good way of evaluating a design. It's a good way of checking a specific solution to a specific problem. I do lots of play tests. I very rarely do focus tests because generally a good play test will work as a focus test as well. All right, so results of playtesting. So you'll refine the negative elements of your game. You'll also start developing sensitivity to player friction points. Like this is one of the important things with playtesting is have everyone watching the playtest, so the entire team can start to get an awareness of how people play the game, and then they'll start to understand, oh, this is what they like, this is what they don't like. The entire team's now thinking about the customer experience, being aware of the customer experience. And then they all just start to align towards that, and it's this wonderful kind of feedback loop. And this is, again, why it really helps to drive your customer engagement overall. Also, man, it always disappoints me if I do a play test and then we'll receive good feedback about friction points, and then at the end of the play test, the rest of the team just entirely dismisses the feedback. Those are always really tough meetings to have. Is like, look at like, you know, because you're seeing something for the first time doesn't mean it isn't invalid feedback. It just means perhaps the other playtesters were not as sensitive as this one is. And we want to be generally orienting this towards your more sensitive players, because if I can fix it for the more sensitive players, I fixed it for the less sensitive players as well. A lot of people they will find, like, you know, for example, player movement. Play tested against 100 people, 99 people say it's fine. One person said they find it really frustrating. If I can fix it for that one person, I've now also improved it for the remaining 99. And I've probably also really increased the overall engagement, because those other 99 were still encountering that friction point. They just weren't vocalizing that it was a problem for them. And I've seen this happen time and time again. We'll have lots of play tests. It's always fine. And then one person says, I didn't understand how this mechanic worked. And then we're thinking about it, and we actually look at our data. We're like, shit, no one understood how that mechanic worked. They just fumbled through it, and we didn't notice they were fumbling through it. This one person was our canary in the coal mine. So we have to fix that. If I sit there and say, well, statistically, it doesn't matter. It's like, no. Customer interaction is not about statistics. It's about in-depth behaviors, and those are very complex. So we have to be sensitive to all the information that we're presented with. Don't necessarily have to act on all of it, but just be aware of it. So refine negative elements of the game. So remove those negative elements, get the teeth off the plate. You'll develop sensitivity to player friction points. You'll start to get a gut instinct for what players like and what they don't like, and you'll start proactively solving these problems, which is fantastic. As friction is reduced, engagement increases, play is improved, and fun emerges. This is the thing, is like, man, a lot of people, they just want a good enough experience. Like think of it like potato chips. Potato chips are never the best thing you've ever eaten, or very rarely are the best thing you've ever eaten. If a potato chip is the best thing you've ever eaten, I concern for your dietary experience. Get out there and eat some better food. But everyone enjoys a potato chip. So like, just make it a good enough potato chip, and then you'll find people will habitually just be snacking on this thing. Your game will be with like, fuck, I just want to get in and just play and enjoy something, and then they start having They're there, they're comfortable, they're enjoying it. Then they start to play because they're like, huh, I want to make this more interesting for myself. Let me try this. What if I try that, you know? And then they start to play. If the game responds to the play, they start to have fun, and then they start losing hours. And then, like, you know, that's where you start noticing that massive increase in player engagement is just getting out of the player's way, resolving those negative friction elements, and playtesting is a super useful tool for doing that. So, important thing, playtesting is not focus testing. As we said, focus testing is to solve a very specific problem. It's also not just your most active community members. There's one big project I was working on, and this was the death knell of the project is we're making genre X. We play tested with the most committed, enthusiastic lovers of genre X. You know, we're making a crafting game. We got the best crafting players to give us feedback. They took that feedback, they implemented it, they released the game, and they found out most players are not hardcore crafting players. Almost everyone who played the game could not open the crafting menu. They played it for 5 minutes, left, and never came back again. Because they focus exclusively on their most dedicated fans who have a super high tolerance on the overall issues that, all the other friction issues that other players have. So they launched it and found there's all these issues in the game that no one else had mentioned because they just I understand that, it's fine. You know, there's actually a really good example of this was, does anyone remember Outlaws? Cliff Bleszinski's big game he released after he left Epic. Very competitive first-person shooter. They tested it on the most competitive first-person shooting fans. Got excellent feedback. Everyone's like, oh, this is the best competitive first-person shooter I've ever played. It's amazing. Then they launched it and quickly discovered it was far too technical for most players. The competitive first-person shooting market is like 5,000 people. And they sold to 90% of that market, so great. And then they closed down the company, and there's a reason why most people haven't heard of Outlaws. Even though reviewed great with the really dedicated players. So playtest with like I said, as generic an audience as you can. And again, with my playtest, I try to get it for people who are not gamers because I want to understand how are they approaching this because I got to fix it for them. If I fix it for them properly, I've actually fixed it for all of the dedicated people as well. They just didn't realize that was a friction point that they were having with the product. And also, as I said, don't ask your playtester to directly tell you how to make the game. That just does not work. Okay. So, fans are not playtesters. You generally want your average run-of-the-mill people. And this is, again, as I mentioned, I think on their first class, we have a really big issue in the games industry where we have put ourselves into a silo and we are really pushing out majority of potential players. We have made this a very hostile experience to most players. Holy crap, I was doing a playtest and I tried to get someone to install Steam who had never used Steam before. We spent days going back and forth on this, getting him where to download, getting it installed, that there's an installation error, getting him set up with an account, figuring out the user interface, telling him, sending him over a Steam key, all these other things. He puts in the Steam key, it downloads a different game. We're trying to figure out what the heck happened there. Turns out he installed the stuff on the wrong platform. We then had to have him move over to a different computer. And there are ways to avoid all of this. My concern is that Steam experience was so fragile. This guy just kept tripping over his own shoelaces throughout the entire experience. And he was tech savvy. He ran a tech company. He was a gamer. He just was not on Steam. He was a console gamer. And I can't be sitting there saying, well, we only test with Steam players. Well, then we keep ourselves locked in. I need to pull in people who are not familiar with it, see where they're tripping over their own shoelaces on this kind of stuff, and then fix that so they're not doing it anymore. You know, like there's like, I don't have my smartphone on me, but like there's a reason why smartphones are such a wildly dominant computing platform right now, because it's so hard to screw them up, which is great. That was also a massive problem. Smartphone design was worked on by millions of people over a decade across just about every single country on the planet. Like, it took a long time for people to figure out what exactly a modern smartphone was. And it wasn't Apple or Google that did it. They made the software that ran the systems, but those early definitions of what a smartphone were from those companies changed radically once they started getting feedback from the community as a whole. So test with your average everyday people. See what they like, see what they don't like. That's some of the most valuable playtesting you can have. So, also, playtests don't dictate, they guide. One of my favorite quotes is, playtesting will tell you how to navigate the mountain you're on. They will not tell you how to get to the next mountain. So this stuff has to be combined with proper project planning and scheduling and all that kind of stuff. You can't just sit there and say, we've got a cube on a screen, we will playtest that endlessly, and then we'll get our MMO. That's not how it works. You know, you have to start planning your MMO as you're climbing those MMO mountains. The playtesting will let you know the best way across that mountain. All right, a few minutes over, but does anyone have any questions? Anything? All right, I'm going to give this a minute. Thoughts, questions, concerns? All right. Oh.
I was thinking when you said about the fans are not play testers.
Yes.
But I was thinking that the fans sometimes they are like the ones who know also the product. So
yeah.
So they provide some feedback about what they're expecting for the next one version or something.
Yeah. Okay. So Anxious, you actually raised an excellent question there, and that is, oftentimes your fans can help you to, like, they're the ones who do a really good job of understanding the essence of the DNA of the genre or franchise you're working within. And this is the so if I was to do a very generic playtesting approach, I would want to focus on as broad a customer base as possible. But if I'm working on a franchise, I absolutely want to be consulting with the fans of that franchise to make sure that we are copying that franchise's DNA properly. Really good example of this, I thought was really interesting, was the character of Batman. So Batman is expressed in a wide range of different genres and different styles. It's really surprising the things that are accepted as Batman canon and not as Batman canon. As in, like, the things that the real hardcore Batman fans say, yeah, that's part of the character, or that isn't part of the character. A really good comparison is Zack Snyder's Justice League and Batman v Superman version of the character was generally kind of pushed against by a lot of the fans, the general kind of Batman fans. Now you certainly have fans of Zack Snyder who really liked it, but for the Batman fan community, they're like, look, that's a version of Batman that is just too aggressive, too violent. The whole entire no-killing thing's really critical to him overall. But those fans really liked the character of, I don't remember his name. There was like a Batman, I'm trying to remember the name of this. It was a version of Batman that took place in the future. It was Bruce Wayne, the original Batman, he gets to be in his 80s, late 80s, I think. He trains a young kid to become a follow-up Batman. Different character, different look, different rogues gallery, different world. Everything's radically different, but a lot of the Batman fans are like, yes, that is Batman. There's a sousance, an essence there to the character they really nail, which is fantastic. Like I'm a big Star Trek fan, and like it's interesting how many versions of Star Trek just they keep trying to make it something that it isn't, you know? And just like this is if I wanted to be watching Star Wars, I would be watching Star Wars. I think that there's something to appreciate within this franchise that you should be leaning into more rather than trying to make this something that it isn't. I think it's really important to get fan feedback there. At the same time, you also need to allow space to innovate and create within this. Because, like, man, as a Star Trek fan, I don't want you just remaking Wrath of Khan again. Give me the next thing that I didn't know to ask for. But maintain the overall spirit of the franchise. Okay, so to answer your question a little bit more directly, yeah, absolutely incorporate fan feedback into this, but also be aware fans will oftentimes tell you what they've already, they'll be telling you what they've already seen, what they're already comfortable with. Take that feedback, think about it, decide how you want to action on it. And, you know, it's important to be aware that, like, part of your job is to innovate and find fresh and original ways of doing this that the fans love and new people love as well. Ideally, when I'm working on something, I want to try to be expanding out its overall appeal and the number of people that enjoy this rather than trying to make it for a more and more specific definition. All right. Any other questions? Okay, in that case, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time, and I'll catch you guys all next week. All right, see ya.